Welcome to Katrina's Creations. This is a tutorial on how to do a lifeline when knitting lace. Now a lifeline is sort of like a safety net. When you are knitting lace, it is usually a very intricate pattern, and I'm going to show you some examples of knitted lace. There's lots of yarn overs, there's lots of knit two togethers. This example right here is a leaf pattern, as you can see. And if you get off on the pattern, it's very hard to backtrack and figure out where your mistake was, or to take the stitches off the needles and move back to a correct row and begin. So a lifeline keeps you from having to rip all of your work completely out, and you do it at increments of 5 to 10 rows. So if you do make a mistake, you only are having to rip out 5 to 10 rows as opposed to ripping out the entire project. So before I get started, I'm going to show you some examples of some knitted lace that I've done. This is the first one. Like I said, this is a leaf pattern, and it's actually a scarf. It's like a small kerchief. This particular pattern is one I would never do the same again. I ripped this out. I did not use a lifeline. I probably ripped it out 9 times before I got it correct. The problem with this pattern wasn't so much the pattern as it was the yarn color that I used. Just a little word of warning: if you are knitting lace, stick to something that is a solid color. This pattern is so busy that you can't see. There is a design, a motif in the lace itself, but you can't see it because the overwhelming colors just dominate the whole pattern. But this was one that was particularly hard because, like I said, the color factor. So let me zoom this in so you can see it a little bit closer up. This last shawl is called a Faroese shawl. The reason being is it has a center panel that runs down the back that is different from the side panels that move off here. So that's just characteristic of this particular type of a shawl, is that it has a center, as I said, a center panel of lace that is offset from the rest of the pattern. And this is done in a cotton. I use this a lot. It is in a solid color so you can see it. It has an edging to it. This is one of my favorite shawls. It's extremely soft. It's not a real detailed lace pattern, as you can see here, but it does have a lot of yarn overs and a lot of knit togethers here that form the shapes. And because of that, it's very easy if you drop stitches or if you get off on the pattern that it's going to affect the entire shawl. So that's where lifelines come in handy. So now let me show you how to do them. This is a shawl that I'm currently working on called Swedish Lines. It does have an eyelet section, as you can see here, which is just eyelet is just created by a yarn over, knit two together. So this is a very simple lace design, but it will work for me demonstrating how to put in a lifeline. I have loaded the stitches right along here that are creating this eyelet section. So you can see right here I have a yarn over, knit two together, yarn over, knit two together all the way through. Now, some needles that are interchangeable come with an attachment for doing lifelines. You don't see it all the time, but occasionally on an interchangeable set of circular needles, you'll see a small hole right in here on the needle, right towards the point, but just a little ways in, just above the taper. And that hole is so that you can thread a small piece of thread through it, and you can actually knit the lifeline right into the row as you do it. My needles don't have that. I don't have, none of my interchangeable needles have that. Like I said, not all of them do. So you do the easy way of putting in your lifeline. You just have a needle, just a blunt-nosed needle, and some contrasting yarn. Usually you use something a little bit thinner than this, but for the sake of demonstration, I chose something a little wider so you can see it. So once that you have done a row and you know that it's correct, and this one is, I am going to take my yarn and my needle, and I'm just going to thread it right through all of the stitches. So everywhere that the cable is running through the stitches, I'm going to run the needle right alongside it and pick those stitches up. You can now see that I have threaded the yarn all the way through the other stitches. You can see it's kind of purple colored. That is my yarn. Now, if you do have a stitch marker, and you probably will with lace knitting, you do not want to thread the stitch marker through the yarn. So you may want to make sure that that is just attached to the cable, that it's not attached to your yarn, because that's going to be moving as you go up. Now, once this is on, you're just going to leave that thread just hanging like this. And you're going to go ahead and knit your next row. You just want to make sure that when you're knitting, you don't pick up this extra thread that you've got. You want to make sure you just get the stitch itself. Now, the purpose happens with this is, so say 5 rows down, you've knit 5 additional rows, you realize your stitch count is off and you've made a mistake. Rather than have to rip all the way back with your work, if you've put a lifeline in every 5 to 10 rows, that's all you're going to actually have to rip back to. You can pull the needles completely out of your work, rip your stitches back. Your lifeline, when you get to that row, is going to be holding the stitches on it. So it'll rip all the way back, and then you can just pick those stitches that are sitting on the lifeline right back up onto your needles, slide your needles right back in, and you are ready to go. So that is the benefit of having a lifeline. It is a little bit time consuming to thread it through, but it's going to save you time in the long run rather than having to rip back, especially if it's something that's very intricate with a lot of intricate lace. It definitely comes in handy to do. So that is my tip of the day, and thank you for watching. I hope you found this helpful. If you have, please give me a thumbs up, and be sure to watch my videos on Saturdays and Wednesdays.